Welcome to another rectangular table discussion. Now we're 8 episodes into WandaVision, and after that last one, as per usual at this show, we kind of have a lot to unpack. What were your thoughts on that episode?
Well, Catherine Hahn is still solving the Marvel villain problem, and she's kind of like acting like a Baron Mordo. It seems like in her origin story, and she's like a better Baron Mordo than Baron Mordo is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How can Tyler Hayward get away with saying she like stole the body when unless she like teleported it out and like that is the actual body that she like teleported into place with her big magic burst? And then also this was very like not it didn't skip around like it has been. Like we don't know what Monica's been doing during this episode.
After watching this one, I kind of got the impression that I was overeager in some of my predictions. I think I was just adding extra villains or adding the fact that Agatha is working under her own volition. It seems like she might be the only villainish type character that we get in the show now that we're 8 episodes in. It doesn't seem likely that we'll get any kind of Mephisto or anybody like that. At the very most, at this point, I'm kind of thinking that we'll get some sort of vague tease of a Mephisto or a Nightmare that'll lead into the Spider-Man movie or the Doctor Strange movie. Whichever one's releasing first, I'm not really sure. But it seems like those major, I guess, bigger name type villains than sort of the B-list Agatha Harkness. I think she's a better small screen type villain. I think they might think of it as a waste to have a Mephisto or a Nightmare or even Dormammu in a show like this.
Even in the like Agatha flashback, I think that she was powering herself up. Like she figured out how to power herself up with Dormammu, and the other witches thought that that was a no-no. That like that witches council kind of felt like Marvel back in the like McCarthy era. Like the witches have to overregulate themselves because of like puritanical people that are like looking for ways to stop them. So like the witch covens have to like stay undercover and like keep themselves under track because like people are picking them up because that's like when the actual Salem witch trials were going on. They have to keep Agatha in check when she discovered this new power source. And I think that Agatha's mother was like one of the Scarlet Witches. I guess the Scarlet Witch is like a position. It's not just like Wanda's code name. It's like the Scarlet Witch is an actual thing. I think that's why she had the like blue glowing halo because she was like the Scarlet Witch at that time, and like Agatha might think that that's her birthright.
Do you think that Salem Witch Trial flashback, do you think that group was any specific Marvel group that is vaguely famous? I don't think it was the Hellfire Club, but that was really the only thing I could think of at the time when I was watching it the first time. And I know the Hellfire Club kind of connects with the X-Men in a way. I didn't know if that was like a version of the Hellfire Club or something similar, but I couldn't place what the name of that group was or if it even matters.
I guess the Hellfire Club is kind of based on like the Freemasons and those like little secret society like Illuminati type clubs, but they're more like politics than like witchcraft.
I thought the Hellfire Club was kind of a group of telepaths, and I think that was why they were so interested in Jean, because she was such a powerful telepath to the point where she was the Phoenix, and I think they thought that their combined strengths were good enough to control the Phoenix and wield the power of the Phoenix. Based on how Agatha was kind of talking out enchantments and speaking spells, and that kind of reminded me of Doctor Strange. That seems like there's going to be some sort of
Magic
mystic
works
bolt.
a fairly consistent way in like most folklore.
I think there's going to be some sort of mystic bolt encounter where it's Agatha versus Doctor Strange. I think that's possible. I think that's as far as they'll go, though, with sort of the bigger name characters. It just seems unlikely at this point, like I said. I think for whatever reason they think it's a waste of a character or a cooler character. I think they only want to have sort of B and C list people on the small screen for whatever reason. They don't want to make Scarlet Witch and Vision pale in comparison to some other big name. I think they want them to be like the most powerful characters at a given time.
I don't think they want to keep overshadowing these. Like the shows were a chance to give like the B list Avengers a chance to shine. So I don't think they want to like overshadow them with like movie people too much.
I kind of asked this in a prior episode. Do you think we're gonna get a ultimate resolution of the Agatha stuff in the next episode, or do you think she will carry on towards some of the other MCU shows or even some of the movies?
Yeah, I doubt it. She's gonna keep. Yeah, she's gonna like escape and like keep hatching her plot. I think that like Doctor Strange is gonna like teleport in, or Wong is gonna teleport in and like blast Agatha real quick and like distract her, and then swoop Wanda through the portal and then escape, and then that'll be that.
Do you think that the battle against Agatha or whatever the encounter with Strange and Agatha, do you think it'll be easy for Doctor Strange? It almost seems like they're building her up to be kind of his equal. Even though obviously as the Sorcerer Supreme there is no equal, do you think they're making Agatha way more powerful than she really is, or do you think she's just powerful compared to Scarlet Witch because Scarlet Witch doesn't fully understand what she's capable of doing? Do you think they're going to try to keep the Doctor Strange conflict quick?
Yeah, it'll be quick within this show. Agatha is like afraid of like Scarlet Witch's raw power, but she was like prepared for her, and she has been training for centuries, so she would like know more now and be able to be more competent right now.
As a telepath, wouldn't Agatha have a profound advantage against Doctor Strange?
I don't think she's a telepath. She's just like a regular witch
I'm pretty sure she is a telepath. That's why she was able to block Scarlet Witch from reading her mind.
with like spells and stuff.
The other thing I wanted to discuss was during kind of the Scarlet Witch flashback to when she was at Hydra, there were some dialogue points that made me think that maybe her powers weren't entirely made because of the Infinity Stones or because of her interaction with whatever Loki's scepter or whatever stone was inside the scepter. Based on what Agatha said, the Infinity Stone unlocked what was already there. You had kind of a differing opinion, but the impression that I got from that was they were trying to say that her experimentation with the Infinity Stones, or what Hydra was experimenting on her with the Infinity Stones, sort of triggered the X gene, which I guess is probably kind of different than her comic origin story. I think that's them vaguely acknowledging the X gene within her.
That's reasonable, and I think they are trying to keep it up in the air to be, and like tease people to be like, oh, maybe X-Men now. But like, I think they are in the comics in the past decade, they have moved away from her being a mutant. They are trying to make her like more magical, and like she got experimented on by the High Evolutionary, and that's like why Pietro can have super speed even though he doesn't have like magic. And even in like current X-Men comics, like mutants are their own like nation now. They have their own like language and they're like writing their own history. So like Jonathan Hickman like crams all these like diagrams and like appendixes and like footnotes into everything. And he's got these like news articles where it's like, oh, 16 million murdered on Genosha from the Sentinel attack, and then like 1.1 blah 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 million depowered by the pretender Wanda Maximoff. So like even the mutants are trying to distance themselves from her and like are saying she's not really even a mutant.
How much of some prior theories do you still believe in that could possibly come true by the end of the next episode? I mean, we've said a lot of stuff where like we said basically half the cast of the show could be a Skrull. Are you still thinking along those lines, or do you think that the Skrull stuff isn't going to come up until Nick Fury? I think they're basically doing House of M, and then the Secret Invasion stuff is going to be kind of when the Nick Fury show comes out.
Wait, there's a whole Nick Fury show?
From what I understand, there's some sort of Secret Invasion show with Nick Fury and Skrulls. I'm not 100% sure when it comes out, but that's what I've heard. And just based on this episode in the flashback, it looks like they paid off sort of the House of M teases that they've been doing this whole time. The impression I got was instead of kind of drastically changing the entire world, like in the original House of M, it sounds like she basically just House of M'd the town of Westview, New Jersey. And what we were seeing as the sort of hexagonal dome was kind of just the new House of M traumatic experience that she just triggered her powers, and whether it was on purpose or accidentally, changed this town almost for the better in a way.
Well, like, the next series is Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think, right? So that's gonna be, like, they're setting up their, like, Thunderbolty, like, corporate Avengers that are gonna be, like, a Dark Avengers mirror to the original. Black Widow should have already been out already. And a lot of, like, Thunderbolts stuff, I think, is getting set up in that. Like, Taskmaster and the other Black Widow are gonna be coming out in that. So they're going to be, like, the evil Hawkeye and, like, the evil Black Widow. And it's going to turn out that they're, like, being funded by General Ross, who's going to become Red Hulk at some point. So he'll be, like, the evil Hulk. They're saying that, like, Justin Hammer from, like, the Iron Man villain is going to come back. He's probably going to get in the Iron Patriot suit that, like, Rhodey had in Iron Man 3. And, like, Falcon, they're going to give Falcon a chance to, like, be the Captain America that, like, they can control through, like, the Sokovia Accords. But he's gonna turn it down, so they're gonna get U.S. agent who's like John Walker, he's basically Guy Gardner, but as a Captain America. He's like super misogynistic, super like jingoistic, like bully. I'm gonna show everyone who's boss. So like he's the guy that they're gonna have be the like corporate Captain America. So like that's gonna be that series, or at least some of that series.
People might not know what you mean by Guy Gardner, so do you want to...
Guy Gardner is one of the Green Lanterns who's like a total douchebag.
Yeah, I just wanted you to expand on that real quick because some people might not know who that is. And when you said that Taskmaster is going to be the next Hawkeye, is that going to just be
the role of like? So I think the original Thunderbolts are going to set up as like a dark mirror version of like the original Avengers lineup. So there's going to be a Cap and like a Hulk and a Hawkeye and a Black Widow and an Iron Man.
Do they not have Bullseye yet? Because I was gonna say, I know that Bullseye kind of even had the Hawkeye, the whole, even like the...
in the actual Dark Avengers, they got Bullseye to dress up as Hawkeye.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's going to be a character yet, but I think like Taskmaster is actually on the Thunderbolts right now. So I think they're just going to have Taskmaster, like he's going to kind of fill the Hawkeye role.
Well, he's way better than Hawkeye though.
Hawkeye was like whiny and annoying pretty much until the movie came out.
Taskmaster is so much better. He should be the leader. Because for those listening that might not know, Taskmaster has the ability to basically immediately learn all the battle strategy and skills of those he's fighting. So the longer he's in an encounter with somebody, the better he becomes and the easier he figures out how to defeat them. Just to kind of go back on what you were saying about Black Widow vaguely, when you're saying the evil Black Widow, you're talking about Yelena Belova. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that's who you meant, because that's who I thought you meant, but some people listening may not know Yelena Belova either. She's got very similar abilities to Natasha. She's just blonde. And
she's got all
Natasha was also blonde half the time in the MCU, but that's whatever. The other thing I kind of wanted to talk about is we still haven't really figured out who Evan Peters is in this show. She as in Agatha, kind of vaguely referred to him in this episode, but we didn't see him on screen in this episode. Do you have any more thoughts or different thoughts on that?
Yeah, he's probably just some guy.
At the same time, like you kind of said, we didn't see Monica Rambeau either. She's probably got to have some sort of grand finale finish. It really seems like they stalled way too long on this, and it just seems like the ending is going to end up being very underwhelming, because it seems like they just forced so much into the first 7 or 8, so much stuff that didn't really advance the plot forward a whole lot. So it almost seems like they're going to try to cram an ending
They're setting up this show, and they're setting up all the shows with it.
It almost feels like they're going to try to cram the finale, because obviously there's not going to be some sort of season 2 of this, I don't think. I'm nervous that episode 9 is going to ultimately be unfulfilling, just because there are so many loose ends to tie up in one episode, and I don't know if they would make an episode longer than like an hour or so. I just don't know how they're going to do that in a fulfilling way, but I guess that's why we tune in every week. Unless I'm mistaken and there is a 10th episode, which would change things a little bit.
I've heard things about a bonus 10th episode, but they have, I think every show is going to have like a behind the scenes how it was made featurette. And that's like the bonus episode. And those are like a stopgap so that there's like every weekend in 2021, there's going to be some nerdy Marvel thing going on. Some like new Marvel content. But I don't think that's going to be like more show or more plot progression. Serialized comics purposely have more loose ends and like introduce new loose ends. Like they know what they're doing.
Well, so you've been talking a lot about Dark Avengers, and I mean, I kind of tried to semi-confirm your thesis on that by saying I'm pretty sure Willem Dafoe is in some capacity involved in the next Spider-Man, and we both agree Willem Dafoe just kind of as the MCU version of Norman Osborn would be really cool. I think he would play the Green Goblin as the new Iron Man coolly. Like, I think he'd do well. Because that was essentially was essentially his role in the Dark Avengers, was the Iron Man type role. Are you saying you're just hoping that they're going to go down a Dark Avengers type road, or do you think it's obvious that it's heading that way?
Dark Avengers kind of spills out of the Thunderbolts. So, like, in the comics in the 90s, the Avengers and the Fantastic Four and a bunch of other teams that, like, weren't selling well in the 90s got shuffled off into, like, over to Image so that they could be drawn all, like, action-posed and scowly and maybe people will like them again. So then they made those heroes go away and, like, come back in, like, it was called Heroes Reborn. But, like, while the Avengers were away, a bunch of, like, C and D list Masters of Evil characters, led by Helmut Zemo, started, like, disguising themselves and calling themselves the Thunderbolts and like posing as heroes to like earn the public's trust so they could then like rob the banks behind the scenes while they like catch some other criminal. It was like the Beetle as like Mach 4 now, and like, oh, I think that they're gonna, so they introduced a villain for Captain Marvel 2 that they haven't said who she's playing yet. And I think who she's playing is Dr. Carla Sofin, who is going to be Moonstone, who is one of the original Thunderbolts, who becomes the Miss Marvel was Miss Marvel. She wasn't Captain Marvel back when this was happening. So she was like the dark Miss Marvel. She takes over the Miss Marvel title, and then there's this whole issue where there's like this giant catfight between Carol Danvers and Carla Sofin, where they're like throwing each other through plane engines and like smacking each other with like parts of planes and stuff. So that's probably going to be part of Captain Marvel 2. But she's going to like start off as like the psychologist for the Thunderbolts.
Speaking of what you said a second ago, it reminded me of a plot point in the X-Men Evolution show, which was probably loosely based on something that actually happened, where the Brotherhood of Mutants in that show, it was like Blob, Avalanche, Pyro, and Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch as well. They kind of had the idea that they didn't want to be seen as bullies or whatever. They didn't want to be seen as outcasts. They're like, we want to be like the X-Men. So they basically purposely tried to create crimes that they could easily solve and just purposely create situations where they could last second show up and save the day and pose in front of the camera and get on the news. It sounds like you're saying the Thunderbolts were kind of something similar.
Same concept.
I can see that being a thing for sure. I would like to see Bullseye as Hawkeye, and I would like to see Taskmaster as just himself, or represent something better than Hawkeye. I guess I can't really think of which of the classic Avengers he most closely resembles, though, besides Hawkeye. He doesn't really use a bow and arrow, but he uses a sword.
He can.
I mostly know him as using, like, a sword.
And there's scenes from, like, the Black Widow trailer where he is, like, using a bow and arrow. So I think he's going to take the Hawkeye role, at least initially.
Well, so who do you think will represent some of the other classic characters, then?
Thunderbolt Ross is going to become Red Hulk, and he'll be the Hulk.
Who's going to be Thor? Do you think Natalie Portman's going to become evil and she'll be Thor?
No, they might blackmail Loki into being the Thor for the team.
That does make sense, because he has a show upcoming, but I don't really know what his show is supposed to be about.
Or, the Marvel Civil War in the comics is about the Superhuman Registration Act, and, like, Tony Stark is ideologically right about that, but they try to make Cap's side the more relatable side, so, like, Tony Stark's side was all the, like, smart scientists that are, like, deciding what's best for, like, the working class heroes. Thor was gone. Like, Ragnarok had actually happened, and, like, all the Thor books were canceled, so, like, Thor was out of commission. So Tony Stark cloned like a synthezoid Thor, who then zapped Bill Foster to death. And that was like one of the big like shock points of like oh, you've gone too far, Tony. The like white vision that they're making, they could turn that into a Thor. The Thunderbolts are kind of like the Task Force X for Marvel too. They became that during like the Civil War era when like Norman Osborn took them over. They were like, oh, reformed villains that are like, oh, you want some time off your sentence? Do these missions for us. So they probably have a way of like freezing them or like controlling them or stopping them. So another plotline they might work in. We know that the Asgardians are on Earth right now, is like in like some refugee camp. So there was a plot line where the UFOs goad Volstagg into fighting them, and they make it look like Volstagg blew up a stadium. So they were like, oh, these Asgardians are such a threat, we need to go invade Asgard. Who knows what they could be plotting? So Tyler Hayward is already that kind of person. And like Thunderbolt Ross is probably already that type of character. So they're probably like trying to drum up some way that they can go invade the Asgardians too.
That synthezoid Thor is a character in the Puzzle Quest game.
They started calling him Ragnarok, yeah.
Initially
they called him Clor. It's like Clone Thor.
The Puzzle Quest game focuses heavily on the Dark Avengers theme, and so you're constantly fighting against Daken, Yelena Belova, and Venom, and like some combination of those three, and then you're constantly fighting against Mob Boss, or Mob Thug, or like Random Soldier Guy, or like Grenadier. I think you alluded to Daken at one point on one of our episodes.
We don't even have Wolverine yet. We're not going to get his like emo son for a while, probably.
For a second, I wondered if they would just make Scourge the Executioner the Thor, but I think he died in the third one, didn't he?
Oh, they could do that too, I guess.
I mean, I guess it's easy to just bring anybody back to life, but didn't he kind of sacrifice himself at the end of that one? I was just thinking about that for a second because he kind of, obviously he is like an axe or whatever. So if he isn't dead, they could use him as sort of the Thunderbolts version of Thor. Like you said, obviously US Agent is probably going to be their version of Captain America. Is there anybody that could be like Wasp?
They have Ghost.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But did Ghost survive the second Ant-Man movie?
I don't really remember, but I did hear that they were bringing her back. But like Wasp isn't the original, like in the original movie Avengers, so they would get to her later, maybe.
They kind of had Yellow Jacket in one of the Ant-Man movies.
He did die,
even though, well, I know, but like Ant-Man was originally Yellow Jacket,
yeah, someone could
so
get
they
the
kind
Yellow
of
Jacket suit.
They kind of messed that up, like messed that around. So they made somebody else entirely the Yellow Jacket, but they just kind of vaguely alluded to Ant-Man things. The coolest part of the Ant-Man movies was the fact that T.I. was in it. Yeah, I think we're kind of on the same page on this. I think as cool and well thought out as my Shadow King theory is, at this point, just based on how this last episode went, it kind of ruined everything that I kind of thought could be possible in that line of thinking. It really does seem plausible that they're heading down a Dark Avengers type thing, and they're going to sprinkle in Secret Invasion as well.
Secret Invasion might not even necessarily be Skrulls. Like, if you read the comics, you would assume it would be, but they might like go in a completely different direction with that. Because there was like a mini-series of Fury's Secret War. Doctor Doom had been like deposed from Latveria. Or maybe it was like a secret mission to depose him. But he got like Spider-Man and Wolverine and Cap and like Iron Man to go like invade Latveria essentially on like a Navy SEAL like secret co-op mission, and then he like mind wiped them so that they didn't know anything about it. And then a year later, Lucia von Bardas was the new like prime minister of Latveria, and she was like secretly powering up all these like C and D list villains with like technology, and then she like set them loose on the city and was like, Nick Fury, you remember what you've done. But like none of the like Cap was like, what did you do, Fury? So that could be something they do with that show.
The other thing that just kind of popped into my head randomly is in the recent past, one of the Spider-Man shows that they've done on like Disney XD or whatever, they basically had Spider-Man be on S.H.I.E.L.D. and he had a team with Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Nova, and White Tiger. So I'm wondering, they kind of already have a Luke Cage that they now have the rights to use again. Do you think they would make a big deal about... I mean, I guess they have Iron Fist, too, that they could use. Because it seems like they're just kind of putting onto the small and big screen stuff that they've vaguely done animated stuff for in the 2000s or whatever. They've done animated shows that addressed some of this stuff. Do you think they'll do any of the
we know they've wanted to do Nova because they set up the Nova Corps in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
They're also going to pay off Adam Warlock at some point, too.
Yeah, he's probably showing up in the next Guardians movie. Also, back to WandaVision, they're saying that, who is the Dottie character? They have a comic going right now where they're trying to, make the Squadron Supreme the next big thing. So the Squadron Supreme is, a spoof off of the DC Justice League from another dimension. Hyperion is the Superman, and, Nighthawk is the Batman, and so on and so on. Speed Demon is the Flash, who's, also a Spider-Man villain. But, Arcana is the Zatanna. And the Dottie character might be Arcana, who is also captured in this thing.
Do you think that all of this stuff could eventually spin out into the alt future where Mr. Sinister donated Cyclops and Jean into the really emo looking Cyclops with long hair, and it's an alt future where...
The Age of Apocalypse?
Yeah. Do you think ultimately we could go into that? Because that show that came out in 2010, Wolverine and the X-Men or whatever, that had sort of unfinished business. That kind of set up an Age of Apocalypse that never ended up happening because the show was canceled. If you haven't watched that, that's one of the more underrated shows out there. Even though it's just one season, it's really cool, and it gives some screen time to some characters that don't usually get talked about a lot, like Maverick. Any last final thoughts about this episode, or what you think is going to be the conclusion of episode 9 of this one season of WandaVision? We kind of got a little bit off the rails. A lot of this episode focused not really on WandaVision, but there wasn't a whole lot to this last episode. It was mostly just flashbacks, but it kind of just created more questions about stuff we had already been kind of trying to find answers to and haven't yet. The biggest things that I wanted to cover was my thought on possibly confirming the X gene by Agatha, and then my other thought was we still don't really know who Evan Peters' character is, and it might turn out that that's just a nobody, like you might have said in the past. I don't think there is any other villain character besides Agatha. I think she's going to kind of be as evil as it gets, or the biggest name.
Oh, the rabbit's probably going to turn into somebody. Another type of henchman for her. And, this whole season, Paul Bettany's been saying, oh, there's, this going to be this surprise cameo, and it's someone I've been waiting my whole life to work with. It might just be Paul Bettany as the White Vision, and he's got to fight himself.
He's always wanted to work with himself. That would be funny. That was something I was kind of wondering, and I mean, I don't know if anybody listening had the similar question. I didn't know if that White Vision was supposed to symbolize something else or vaguely pay off something different that happened in comics. I know that you said there was a version of Vision that was just very deliberate and direct.
That is what he looked like going into the 90s. That he's all white. In the arcade game, he was that version, because that's when in the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis era, that's what he looked like. And I think he may have got his original colors back in the Heroes Were Born thing, or at some point he switched back in the 90s.